started off with fashion design. I studied clothing in school and I worked full-time. And then I just sort of started doing it on the side for friends. And 3 years ago, almost this month, I was reading Nylon magazine and I read about a store called iHeart. And I just called them up. I sent them pictures that I took at home, like with my digital camera. It was 15 styles, I believe. And mostly it was just like a mix of old vintage keys and horns and things from the 50s and kind of treasure chesty feeling. And they bought every piece. And so some things I was able to duplicate, and then some things I had to actually sell them, the actual pieces, because they were vintage finds, and sometimes you get dead stock, and others I didn't. So I sold to them, and then from there I actually got really lucky and started to get some press. A friend of mine who worked at Jill Stewart said, "Can you come in and do like a little trunk show?" I ended up selling to all the sales girls at Jill Stewart, and they would wear them every day. I mean, there was like 4 or 5 sales girls on the floor, and they would get all the, there was always press in there, people shopping, and I just kind of like stepped into a lot of luck that way. And I think the best friend of the assistant to the accessory editor at Vogue had come in and said, "Where did you get your necklace?" And I actually, when Lucky Magazine, I was still working at, I was designing the women's denim line at Old Navy, and I was there for 3 years. And when Lucky Magazine called me to make an appointment to come to my house, I actually quit my job. I think it was the same day. I was like, you know what? If Lucky Magazine's going to write about me, I'll probably start getting a lot of business, so I could leave my job. So I actually just got up and left my job, and I decided that I was going to try to do this. Like, I really didn't, I had no training, I had no formal background at all. I just always liked collecting things and just sort of figured out. I used to take apart jewelry and put it back together. And at the time I was doing a lot of, nothing was original, everything was found objects kind of put together. And that was so popular at the time. Like, it's still, actually it's interesting, it's 3 years later and there are still designers that are coming out with new collections and doing it. But I've moved past that. Like, my aesthetic is definitely has that sensibility, but it doesn't, it's definitely evolved more. There's a lot more originality than using actual pieces that have been found. But yeah, and I left my job and I started, and then I got an email from Vogue, and they were also like really excited and very aggressive about it. They ran that piece, and then when that came out, it was like, it was crazy. I think originally, at the time, I was traveling a lot to Mexico and Guatemala because I was designing denim, and a lot of the wash houses and factories were there. And I had always had like an interest in Mexican folk art, but it was never a conscious thing. I never like would say, "Oh, I love," it was just kind of just felt like a natural part of who I was. I have no idea why I don't have any Mexican descent. I didn't spend that much time in Mexico growing up or anything like that, but I just always felt a really intense connection to it. And traveling through Guatemala and Mexico, in the airports and in the markets, there was so much, folk art. And the bright colors and a lot of sentiments and worry dolls. I think that there's a certain level of sentiment and intensity in Mexico, and a lot of more, I guess, like you can say, like South American, Latin American, like cultures that we as Americans, we don't have that. It's not, I don't know why, it just sort of is a little bit more surface maybe, but we look at death so differently than, let's say, they would, or even life, as they would. Or family is different, celebrating is different. And I think that I'm passionate, and I'm a little dramatic and emotional, and so I think I relate more to those cultures. I started just everything coming from the market, I think I was saying that when I started putting together my first collection, it was just like brass chain, from the market on 6th Avenue in the garment district. And then I found this tiny little Tibetan prayer skull. And then, from the market, they were available, I started actually having to bring them in because I was using so many, and I started selling, and then I decided that I wanted to start working in gold and silver. And Metalliferous was a really great resource. It's this amazing find in the Diamond District on 46th Street, and they actually had been so helpful. They led me to my casting company. So through my casting company, I went there and I decided I was going to cast something. You know, like I hadn't found something. I said I want to cast that and make it in gold. So I started doing that, and they introduced me then to a jeweler that would polish it and clean it and set it with diamonds and, you know, do that whole thing. And it just like, one thing just kept leading to another. I would be at my casting house and there would be a guy who was like a model maker. And I would be overhearing his conversation with somebody, and I would say, hey, you know, I'm a designer, what can you do? What are your limitations? And he was like, you know, I met this guy, his name's Bobby from Thailand, and he was like, I can do anything. And he literally can do anything. He's amazing. He does everything by hand. He carves all the waxes, and then I have him cast at my casting house. My jeweler is this 80-year-old Argentinian man named Hugo, who's like a second grandfather to me. He's amazing. And I've been working with him for about 2.5 years now. And everything just kind of linked up to one another, and I found my resources all in Manhattan. Through so many people I've met, so many other people, and it's really been, you have to be confident, and you have to know that you're your own resource. Like you have to go out and find it on your own. And you have to have the right attitude that people want to work with you. You know, I'm very hungry and I'm very aggressive about getting my product into the hands of the right people for production and making sure that it's, you know, as good as it can be. But I'm also really interested in developing relationships with those people so that they want to work with me. I actually am in the process of launching a fine jewelry collection. Even though costume jewelry I love it and it's so playful and it's so much fun, there's so many other markets out there that I would love to tap into. For the fine jewelry, I just used all of my resources that I had already developed, and you know, figured that I really wanted to get a little more serious about my design. I enjoy it too. I love going and finding cool things and merging them together to create fun, interesting pieces, but I was missing the purity of design. My aesthetic definitely has a lot of throwback to, you know, different generations and years past, but there's also like a futurist inside of me that wants to really learn about design and architecture. And that's also, I actually started doing private client engagement rings. And I'm actually going on my 5th client, and I'm doing their engagement ring and then their wedding bands as well. And it's just so cool because there are people out there, so many people that are not interested in going and buying something off the shelf. They want to put their own love. And it's been so much fun. It's been stressful because it's a lot to live up to, but you know, when somebody has an expectation, it's like the big moment. It's like the moment of their life, and they want the perfect ring, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But I've worked with anyone from somebody that I had no idea who they were to the partner of a girl that I was very close with, and her boyfriend, I had offered my help, and he went forward and we worked together for her, so I knew about her sensibility in combination with him knowing about her sensibility. Up to, you know, I'm dealing with a client right now that is interested in my own collection, my fine jewelry collection, and we're doing a rendition of some pieces that they've seen because they're like, we love those, that's what we want. So we're actually going to do some people, and we're working with the couple. I think that the ultimate goal is that I started Made Her Think 3 years ago with no initial, it just happened, it really did, it just really happened. And my dream was always to have a clothing line and to have a full brand related to clothing. And I think that because I actually chose jewelry, and it surprised me, but I'm so in love with it, that I will probably have that as my starting point. And from there, take Made Her Think or Meredith Khan, because Meredith Khan is actually like my self-titled, it's my fine jewelry, and take it into more of a luxury brand. I would love for Made Her Think to be a full brand offering handbags and shoes and fragrance and ultimately clothing line, and then of course going into men's and home and a full brand, full lifestyle brand, because that's for the most part what I started to create when I did, you know, when I really started getting into my 2nd and 3rd collections. But and then for Meredith Khan, for that to be again possibly, evolve into a full lifestyle brand. But that's, really down the road.
Yeah.